Salam alaikum alaikum sala, this is Tata Madamba. Today we're doing a video on the history of Nkisi Malongo, on the history of Palo Mayombe, Palo Monte. We're not going to be speaking about the history within Cuba post to the slave trade. We're going to do prior to the slave trade. And for us to understand our roots and where we come from, we have to understand the Bantu people. And you have to keep in mind that there are a lot of tribes and a lot of anthropologists in history that happen within the Bantu people. So who are the Bantu people? The Bantu people, or the Bantu, are a native ethnic African group who speak the same language or dialect. The Bantu are indigenous people located in central southern Africa. Palo Mayombe roots or practice come from these ethnic groups or tribes which were enslaved and expedited to Cuba during the transatlantic slave trade. Many of our practice in Palo Mayombe, such as the Nkimba, the initiation, having Ngangas or an Nkisi, the way we have the social structures, the way our music, our foods, all of these things come from the Bantu people and their culture. And there's a lot of history and a lot of culture that was, kept in Cuba. And we have to understand the Bantu people. Hollywood and history and our Western perspective of slaves is completely misunderstood. These Bantu people were organized. They had a society. They were people. Very smart. They had professions. Very organized. So there are many tribes, and this is some of the Bantu tribes. And we're going to speak about more so the kingdom, because there was a kingdom there that were organized, and the founder of the kingdom. And it has to do more so with an Mfumo called Lukeni Nini, and the origin of the Kongo kingdom. So 500 BCE, some Bantu tribes began migrating southeastern from West Africa. Other studies have discovered the Bantu are Israelites who migrated from northeast Africa and can be considered the lost tribe of Israel. Here, more so, we're speaking about the Lemba tribe. But what we can take from this is the origin of the Kongo kingdom has to do with the Bantu migration, and you can look this up. The Kongo kingdom was formed by a Mani Kongo, a king called Lukeni Nimi, based on a historian called Jean Cuvelier. And he has certain books and certain publications that he made while he lived there, or he did his studies. And the Congo, it was extremely vast, and there was a lot of wars and a lot of turmoil there within the Congo. But Lukeni Nimi, his father was an Mfumo or a chief within the northern part of the Sierra River, and he moved down south. Lukeni moved down south to conquer that land there, and he constructed, or he formed, the Mani Kongo and Bansa Kongo, and he was, traditionally he was the founder of the Congo, and we'll get into that now. But prior, for this migration of the Bantu, the African perspective, they came down from northern eastern part of Africa. The European perspective, they came from the western and moved down southeastern south. They moved down. You guys can do your study and look a little bit more in depth into this. There's a lot of information about the history of Africa, but let's go ahead and get into who is Lukeni Nimi. Lukeni is a traditional founder of the Lukeni Kanda Kongo or Lukeni Kanda dynasty. He is the first king of the Congo and the founder of the kingdom Congo dia Ntultila, also called Mongo dia Congo, the mountains of the Congo. He also established a capital called Mbanza Congo in a town southern of the Sierra River. And here we in Palo Mayombe, you're going to hear that a lot, Mbanza Congo. It was believed that he could control the weather, summon the dead, and bless his subjects with moving his fingers. So, he was, I'm pretty sure he was an Mfumo or an Ngangan Kisi Malongo. He had knowledge over nature and its powers. And there's a lot of history on Lukeni and, the passings when he passed away and how he affected the Congo per se. And here's a drawing of Lukeni so you guys can have an image and relate more in depth of this king. Now the death of Lukeni, after the death of Lukeni, his brother took the throne and expanded the kingdom to the neighboring states like Luango and Dembo. The Mwene Congo often gave governorship to the members of the family and clients. With this came the loss of influence, and the power over the region was more symbolic. And then in 1485, the Portuguese arrived in the Congo. King Nsinga Nkubu was baptized in 1491 and named Joao. And you have to understand that this king, and when he seen these Portuguese arrive through the ocean, through Kalunga, and anybody who practiced these traditions understand, the importance of Kalunga, how she's the thresholds of the worlds. They regarded the Portuguese or these visitors, they regarded them as visitors from the land of the dead. And you're going to hear, and some books in Palo Mayombe speak about the king of the Mani Congo, Joao, and his son, Alfonso. And, his death later on, had many successors to this kingdom. And we'll go ahead and get into that. There was a lot of history, a lot of kings, a lot of debates, a lot of issue, turmoils, wars against the slave trade and the politics within that land. Very interesting. You guys can look up Lukeni, Lua Nimi, but he always just know that he was the founder of the kingdom of the Mani Congo, that dynasty. And after his death, his brother had sons, and there's a lot of history. I'm not gonna make a extremely long video about the history of the Congo, of each king, because there was a lot of them, but I'll at least name some successors through time. And here are other kings and queens of the Congo, like you see his son Alfonso. They were all baptized, and then later on, in Jingan Singan Bande, that was a queen, and she was very fierce. I got named after her. The spirits gave me the name from the land that she conquered, Matamba, and also the land Ndogo. She was a very fierce queen, and Shaka Zulu's another king in the 1700s. He was from the Zulu tribes, fierce warrior, fought against the Europeans, and there's a lot of history. I advise you guys to, look these queens and kings up and see how they affected, these kingdoms and the way their government and the way of life, their culture was. Here's a drawing of Njingan Singa Mbande. She looks very docile, but she was the complete opposite of that. She knew the art of war. She was a great negotiator and an activist for her people, for her Kanda. And she conquered many lands like Matamba, and I'm named. The spirits gave me the name of Matamba because of her, that she was an activist for her people. And Singa refers to the umbilical cord. She was born with the umbilical cord around her neck, choking her, and the traditional healers and the midwives seen it as a sign of the spirits, marking her that she was going to be a positive impact for that community, that she was one day going to be a queen and help out the people with the slave trade. You guys should look up Njing and Sing and Bande. Here's Shaka Zulu, another fierce warrior. There's, I think, documentaries on Shaka Zulu. Very fierce warrior, very fierce and intelligent. He also knew the art of war. Now here is a book that I have that is called Among the Primitive Bakongo, written by John H. Weeks. And he's a historian. He's a missionary. He lived in Africa for over 30 years, and he took pictures and he wrote over his experience. And there's pictures of a king called Mbembe Dom Pedro VI, and he was a successor to the gown and the staff that was made out of silver from the prior kings. And the slave trade, or when we think about the slaves, we think that they were just people running around. They were cannibals and hunters and gatherers, and they didn't have social structures, and that's completely wrong. The Kongo or the Bakongo, these people had a kingdom and were very intelligent. They lived within nature and had an extremely well-defined social structure, a politics, an institution, a political institution. And you have to change your perspective, because after the slave trade, this is what happened in Cuba. When we start to speak about the Imbongi, the Fongo, and especially the Fongo, at least within my household where I was initiated into, we had something called the Fongo, which it was like a public hearing when the whole household would come together to speak certain issues about the house, like if a hurricane was coming, or certain issues within our community, and what we can do to resolve it. And you have to keep under count that Palo Mayombe is extremely vast and deep. It's just not about medicine and witchcraft and all of this. No, this is a community. It's for health and being a positive member within the community. Let's go ahead and look at another picture here. You might see them, having those gathered. They all would gather up to have certain discussions or ceremonies or rituals about the Ganda, about the whole community. And Africa is very big with community in general, not just the Bakongo, all traditions in Africa, because they understand that you alone cannot live. You need that social network, the guidance from, your elders, and most of all, the accumulated knowledge of our ancestors. And that's why we worship our ancestors, because they were here before us and they have that accumulated knowledge, and we can gain advice from our ancestors. And all of this, during the slave trade, and they went to Cuba, somewhat the same structure happened. Not just to keep the tradition alive, but to construct a community. And there was other, communities like Lo Abacuas in Cuba. That was another social structure within Cuba. I don't know, how is it now? Is that social structure, healthy? But for sure, these institutions, or these what we consider occult, comes from these Bakongo people. Here is a fungo, right? Here we can speak of, they'll go under a tree and they'll speak about the issues to somebody called an Nganga Nzonsi. We spoke about what is an Nganga and Nkisi in prior videos, but they'll speak to the Nganga Nzonsi, and he was very skillful in the matter related to, justice, decision-making, negotiation, law, punishment, and fundamentally, he was the truth finder of all the issues within the community. And later on, then he'll go to the Imbongi. he'll go up to the institution where he represented his certain kanda, and he'll speak about the matters of, of the weather, of the issues, of the problems that the people were having, the farmers or the blacksmith, or the daily, the marriages, the death of certain people within the community that were very important, and now that they passed away, the certain rituals that you had to do. So this is a different role. He was an Nganga Nsonsi. Like I said, there was an Nganga Nkisi Malongo, Nganga Doko. There was many professions within a community. And another one was an Nganga Nzonzi. And he had a very important role within the community because he tied and untied those knots within the community, those relationships. And you have to keep in mind and change your perspective that, the slaves or the Bakongo people were just primitive. Not at all. They were very educated and very conscious within their community and their purpose within their community. Now here, it's people are, this represents a picture of the Nkimba, the secret society. These people are being initiated within the community. And Nganga Nkisi Malongo, the specialist of medicine of nature, the traditional healer, would conduct these initiations or these ceremonies. And obviously he would speak with the Nganga Nsonsi, the truth finder, or to let him know, hey, these people are being initiated within our community. And if, certain members of this ritual don't accomplish the process of initiation, the Nsonsi would have to handle that and go to the Mbongi and speak about what they would do. Or if somebody was initiated and they passed away, the Nganga Nsonsi would speak to the Nganga Nkisi Malongo to see the rituals that they would have to do so the negative effects won't happen within the community for that spirit or that person. And obviously to find closure for the members that he was a part of that he was a positive impact within the community, to have closure, to tie and untie those relations, to let go or to bring forth. And in Kimba and Palo Mayombe, we kept this. We kept, initiations. It's called in Kimba. There's different types in Kimba and in Kimpa. And the way that is done in Africa is done differently in Cuba due to, the slave trade and the loss of culture, the loss of knowledge. But they were able, to keep some of the roots and construct their own structure that, they ended up making Palo Mayombe. And tatas, some tatas like Tata Juan Janes, he constructed Palo Monte. He made the branches more well defined. Now here is, a witch doctor and his assistants. In other words, this is from a Eastern or from John H. Wick's perspective. In reality, he's not a witch doctor. He's a traditional healer with his apprentice, because there's no such thing as witches or any of that. There's only doctors, traditional healers, and his assistants or apprentice that they're going to take over the role when he continues on to the spiritual realm. Same thing as a godfather. Like in Cuba, he's the godfather with his godchildren. But in Cuba, the social structure or the community is not the same as in Africa. In Africa, Palo Mayombe or in Nkisi Malongo, right? It was a pillar within the community. It was accepted. It was needed. And Cuba is looked as a religion, a practice. That's it. It has nothing to do with the politics. But in Africa, the spirit and the spirit world was very had to do with politics. It had to do with the political institutions. And that's why, the Nganga Nkisi Malongo had a certain power over speaking about what's happening within the community. Different roles. There's many different roles, many different types of Ngangas. Now, you You guys look up the other video that I made, what is an Nganga and what's an Nkisi, and it'll orientate you more so you can grasp a better picture of what is an Nganga and an Nkisi, because in Cuba we call it an Nganga, the actual Nkisi, the spiritual pop. And you know, in Nganga and Nkisi Malungu, the traditional healer in Cuba just has to do with the medicine and that's it. But in Africa, you know, he had to do with initiation, and he had a role within his community, a tremendous role. When you start to read about history and anthropology, you'll see that the Nganga and Nkisi Malungu had a very specific role, and there were different types of Ngangas. Now, when we look at, you know, the fetishes or the Nkisi Ngundis, or, you know, what we're going to call it magical objects from a Western point of view, which for us, you know, is looked at as the vessel, the futu, for the spirit or the medicine to vibrate, to live, and to have a cause and effect within our physical realm, is done completely different. You know, you see that statue there is an Nkisi Ngundi. We call that in Cuba a kini kini. You know, the loss of culture due to the slave trade, and, you know, the practice or their political institution, they couldn't construct that in Cuba because they were slaves. So, you know, they had to shift their practice and their way of life and their culture, and they constructed what we know as Palo Mayombe, and in Nkisi Malungu, the medicine of nature. And it has somewhat the same structure, the same initiation process. And, you know, Palo Mayombe is extremely misunderstood. There's not a lot of knowledge within the history and what truly goes on within a household of Palo Mayombe. Now here, this is a picture from the book, The Quest for Therapy in the Lower Sierra, written by Jensen Lemba. And this speaks more about, you know, the location of the Mbongi, the room or the institution, the political institution where the Nganga Nsonsi would go report the matters of the people. And there the kings or the representative of that whole community would make certain decisions. Here's another picture of it, you know, the house of this is more towards the initiation and how things would be set up within that community. You have to understand, right? Hopefully this video orientated you and changed your perspective that the Kongo are not just, you know, cannibals and hunters and gatherers and just killing each other and very primitive people. No, the Kongo were organized, and they had a social structure, a political structure, and they were very smart people. I want to thank you guys for your time. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Like, share it, and subscribe. And you can put on the icon, the little bell, so you can know when I post. Thank you guys for your time. Salam alaikum, alaikum salam.